When Alan Woods and Liam O'Connor at ITMA asked me to be part of this wonderful project, my biggest challenge was deciding on which topic to focus on actually drawing from the well. There were so many paths I wanted to travel with dance, but I decided to follow the path of dancer Jack Lattin from Kildare, literally. Back in August this year, Liam brought my attention to an interesting piece of research by Sean Donnelly, and when I read a line in it, "I'll make you dance, Jack Lattin," a memory was resurrected from 2005 when I was studying English in St Patrick's College in Drumcondra. So I took into rooting through my parents' attic, trying to find my old journals from college and my notes, and I located my notes on Joyce's Ulysses, from which that line is taken. And in it I had written something along the lines of, "I'll make you dance, Jack Lattin. What does that mean? Who was Jack Lattin? And investigate later." So 15 years later, here I am, and I said I better do what my 18-year-old self had told me to do back then.
In St David's Churchyard, Naas, County Kildare, on a well-preserved tombstone, you'll find, "Here lieth the body of John Lattin, who departed this life the 7th day of July 1731, in the 21st year of his age." Death at such a young age in these times was not unusual, but the demise of Jack Lattin was far from it, and the story of his death lived on in local and family tradition for nearly 2 centuries. Jack was the eldest son of Patrick Lattin and Jane Alcock, and heir to the 600-acre Morristown Lattin estate. Settled in the same place for over 500 years, the Lattins were an Old English Roman Catholic family, who retained their lands throughout the upheavals of the 16th and 17th centuries. By the age of 21, Jack was already a well-accomplished and much sought-after dancer and fiddle player, who frequently played with piper Lawrence Grogan of Johnstown Castle, Wexford, who was admitted attorney of the Court of Exchequer in Dublin, May 1726. Writer Thomas Amory recalls a music session at the Conniving House on Sandymount Strand, Dublin, and the company he had enjoyed there during the first half of the 1720s. The Conniving House was a little public house kept by Jack McLean, about a quarter of a mile beyond Ring's End, on the top of the beach within a few yards of the sea. Many a delightful evening have I passed in this pretty thatched house, with the famous Larry Grogan, who played on the pipes extremely well, dear Jack Lattin, matchless on the fiddle, and the most agreeable of companions. There are a few versions with varying details of Jack's feat, but the version from the Mansfield tradition is the most likely. Maud Mansfield, great-grandniece of Jack Lattin, recalls, "Jack Lattin, dressed in satin, broke his heart of dancing. He danced from Castle Browne to Morristown." A few days prior to his death, Jack Lattin was said to be visiting Castle Browne, roughly 8 miles from his home. Castle Browne, a 15th century Eustace castle, was built to defend the Pale, a double ditch separating English settled land from Gaelic land. The Brownes, like the Lattins, were Roman Catholics of Old English descent, and the two families would have socialised together. Perhaps in the course of a night's dining and drinking, one of the Brownes challenged Jack to dance home from Castle Browne to Morristown. As this is exactly what he did. He danced his way along the 8 miles, with accounts claiming he was escorted on the journey by friends, backers and a musician, while in another account he accompanied himself on fiddle, dancing and playing simultaneously. He changed his step every furlong, 1/8 of a mile, and there were heavy wagerings on both sides. He reached his home and won the bet, but whether from exhaustion or a weakened body that then caught a disease, Jack passed away a few days later at Morristown, Lattin on the 7th of July 1731.
I'll Make You Dance, Jack Lattin actually became used as a threat in Kildare, and James Joyce then quoted it in Ulysses when Leopold Bloom is about to be punished by a few well-dressed Dublin society ladies for sending them anonymous, obscene postcards. Castle Browne is the starting point of Jack's dance, and it's now known as Congo's Wood College, which is a Jesuit boarding school for boys. And James Joyce boarded there in the college between 1888 and 1891. And it's quite possible that it was here he heard the story of Jack Lattin.
Less than 2 years after his death, a tune called Jack Lattin began to appear in publications, the earliest mention occurring in Faulkner's Dublin Journal, the 5th of June 1733. Jack Lattin appears to have had become very popular within a very short period of time. In 1734, Dublin music collector John Neal published his third collection of country dances that were popular in Ireland at the time. This list of 56 dances were mainly of Scotch country dances. However, it did include 3 Irish tunes: The Humours of Trim and Larry Grogan, both double jigs, and Jack Lattin, a 3-part reel.
There's an 1807 account of Jack Lattin which claims that he not only composed the tune named after him, but he danced to it on his journey from Castle Browne to Morristown. But how true that is, or who was the original composer, I guess we'll never know. But we can assume it was almost certainly a fiddle player who knew that Jack was an accomplished dancer of reels. Solo dancing from this time was mainly percussive and improvised, and it appeared as stage dances. In June 1736, it was danced in the Smock Alley Theatre in Dublin twice, the first time by a man and the second time by a couple. And there's also accounts from the late 1700s of it being played for the Rinca Fada, which would suggest it was a well-known tune amongst all the musicians of Ireland, because the Rinca Fada was a dance that was being danced all over Ireland at the time.
In 1804, the famous Tipperary piper O'Farrell published his tutor and collection of music for the Irish or Union pipes, and included Jack Lattin with variations. The tune with variations was still in circulation in the late 19th century in South Leitrim, as collected by Stephen Greer. The tune took on many variations both in notation and name, particularly when it travelled to Scotland. Jake Lattin, Jackie Lattin, Jacko Lattin, Jackie Lattin and Jenny Lattin are some of the few, while all adding further variations and parts to the original 3-part reel. While Jack Lattin had faded in popularity in Ireland, there are a number of related tunes to be found with the same strain, such as Jenny Rocked the Cradle, Jackson's Reel, The Glen Road to Carrick and The Pinch of Snuff. I was interested in tracing the Lattin family tree, to see if I could find any descendants of Jack Lattin. The Morristown Lattin estate passed to Jack's grandniece Pauline, who married Alexander Mansfield of Yeomanstown, and the estate stayed in ownership of the Mansfields until the 1960s. Following the Lattin Mansfield pedigree, to my disbelief, I found Jack's relative Peter Sweetman, a man whom in recent years I had greatly admired and dealt with on a few occasions. While he is not a dancer, he most certainly can dance rings around a courtroom when it comes to environmental issues.
Well, I wondered what kind of character Jack Lattin was and how he might have felt as he went along this journey. I had imagined him as a roguish 21-year-old, heir to his family's estate, a confident dancer, matchless on the fiddle, and probably really stubborn because he took on this challenge. But maybe full of fun and mischief too. charming character, drawing huge support both in the bet and from the spectators along the roads that he danced that were there to support him. So, having spent most of autumn 2020 researching Jack, I thought it would be fitting to conclude this project with a dance in memory of him to the tune named after him on the very roads that he danced in 1731.
In October, I travelled to Clane, County Kildare to retrace Jack's dance path. Using the Taylor and Skinner's roadmap of Ireland from 1777, I started at Clongowes Wood College, which was once Castle Browne, and walked the 8 miles or so to Morristown Lattin. Jack was said to have changed his step every 1/8 of a mile, and it's little wonder his body may have died from exhaustion. I, having considered this as an option, but not wanting to die at the end of it, decided to change my step every half a mile, and I marked out 8 locations to commemorate them. These 8 locations I chose specifically as places that were present in Jack's time, and he would have danced past them on his final journey on those Kildare roads. Walking the historical path in October's lockdown silence gave me a great sense of the world Jack Lattin lived in during the 1700s. A land saturated in history, surrounded by huge estates, with houses I could only ever dream of from my dolls as a child. Ladytown, Sherlockstown, Strawberry Lodge, Blackhall, home to Theobald Wolfetone, Jigginstown, Oberstown, Millicent House, home to Richard Griffith, famous for his geological maps of Ireland, Irishtown, Gammonstown Fitzgerald Estate, Morristown. Even the road itself had its own stories. It was the road from Naas to the Hill of Tara, the Road of Kings. I thought to myself as I walked it, if only this road could talk to me.
Donegal fiddle player Cathal Ó Curráin also recorded the 3-part Jack Lattin reel for me, the original one. And listening to it as I travelled around Kildare, retracing Jack's footsteps, I tried to imagine how Jack would have danced to this tune. There was also a line in Sean Donnelly's research that really caught my attention, and it actually played quite a large role in the creation of my dance then for Jack. It was a remark by Queen Victoria while being entertained at the Duke of Leinster's house in Carton in the 1800s, and there was an Irish step dancer dancing for her, and she was heard to say, "The steps are very droll," and this really made me laugh. I was, droll. I don't know if it was a compliment or not, but it reminded me of the older generation that are long gone now, but those people that I grew up watching that were full of crack and devilment and mad shapes and steps when they were dancing, and that's what came into my head then when I read this line, and I said, well, I guess some of those shapes will have to play a part in my creation for Jack. I imagine Jack dancing the roads with great energy and devilment, teasing those who might have bet against him with his effortless and witty steps and shapes. I also thought Jack would appreciate it more that I focus on his great feat of really dancing from Castle Browne to Morristown, rather than focusing on the tragedy that befell him. So drawing inspiration from all of that and the tune, my surroundings, the historical sites around here, I formed a dance for Jack, and it's partially structured, but there's loads of space left for spontaneity and crack on the day.
On the 6th of November I returned to Kildare in the company of Cathal Ó Curráin on fiddle, and in memory of Jack Lattin we played and danced from Castle Browne to Morristown and lived to tell the tale.
You missed it.